Okay, this is the first part of painting with acrylics. We're doing color mixing. Got my #1 art supply, my cup of coffee. Alright, so first of all I want to talk to you about this. This is one type of surface that we call a palette in art. And this is one that you often see in school. It is not the only type of palette. A palette is just basically, the way we use the word to apply to this tool, is any surface that you're going to use to mix and hold your paints on. This is a plastic palette with 10 wells. These little indents here we call wells. And you can see this one's a little bit on the dirty side. One of the things is we're using acrylic paint, and great thing about acrylic paint is when it dries, it can peel off. You can see it. It's like plastic. And we'll just peel that off. I can take my palette knife. Okay, and we can get that fairly clean. Alright, and just clean that up a little bit. Clean that up in a moment. This is a palette knife. It comes in different shapes and sizes. These are just two of the many shapes. Sometimes they're plastic, sometimes they're metal. And basically a palette knife we use in conjunction with our palette to mix colors. And we'll be demonstrating how we can do that in a minute. So we have palette and palette knife. For our color mixing for our color wheel, we'll be using acrylic paints. And this is very important for students to understand, is that there are very many different types of paints. And they're used for different things, and they're more or less effective for different things. And they cannot all be used together. Some of them can, sometimes, under certain circumstances. But for our purposes, we want to make sure that you're exclusively using acrylic. So when you're getting a tube or a bottle, always make sure that you see the word acrylic on the packaging. Alright, this is incredibly important. You can see this one. This is a brand that doesn't even have it marked. They happen to know that our acrylics is an acrylic paint. But when you don't see acrylic specifically on there, ask first. Don't just go right into using it. You want to make sure that it is in fact acrylic paint, because if you mix acrylics with certain other types of paint, it may end up ruining your project and cause cracking, so we want to avoid that. When you're choosing your colors, it's also very important to pay attention to which color specifically you're using. And as you can see, these are all yellow, but when we put them next to each other, we can see they're not all the same yellow. And if I start my project using this yellow, for example, and then I come back to continue working on it, and I'm not paying attention which yellow I was mixing with, and then I pick this one, well, my colors are going to look really off. They're going to look really different. There's going to be a lack of consistency. So it's very important that when you're starting a project, you want to read the label. Make sure that it's the right type of paint, and make sure that you've made a note to yourself in your notebook or on the back of your project what type. We can see this one says primary yellow. It's often got different languages saying the same thing because these paints are sold all around the world. And you can see this one is primary yellow, and this one here, which looks very similar but is in fact different, is a color called Azo Yellow Lemon, and that would give me very, very different results if I mistook what I was mixing. Here's another yellow. This one is called Azo Yellow Medium. You can see it's very, very different. And here's yet another one. And this color is just also a primary yellow, but it's a different brand. And so this is also important to keep aware of, that different brands have their own color palettes, and what is considered primary yellow by one brand may not be the same thing in another brand. So that's very important for you to be aware of that and to keep track of what you actually use as you are mixing your paints and creating your project.